Now looks like somebody broken down on the 110 North around Sepulveda Boulevard. They're stuck in a center traffic lane. Diamond Bar, problems on the 60 West at D-Bar Boulevard. A wreck to the right shoulder, slow from the 71. And the 60 West at Nogales Street, Roland Heights. Crash on the right side here with a busy drive from at least that 57. Downey, that's a stalled vehicle slowing the commute on the 105 East. It's at Lakewood Boulevard. It's stuck in the left lane, and we're busy right as you get towards Paramount.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? Call the accident guys. Because unlike other firms, an attorney will negotiate your case, not a paralegal.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
LeBron James is hosting a film festival next month designed to promote films that empower athletes and their storytelling. The festival is July 13th at Newhouse Hollywood. One of the two films showcased in the festival is LeBron's Black Ice, a documentary about black hockey players dealing with racism. LeBron's company Spring Hill Productions produced the film. Black Ice opens in theaters on July 14th. The other feature film is Goliath, a Showtime docuseries about Lakers great Wilt Chamberlain. The film was produced by Content Cartel, a production company owned by NBA Hall of Famer Kevin Garnett. Garnett played the part of Chamberlain in a 1996 movie called Rebound, a film about a New York City playground legend named Earl the Goat Manigault. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
2 years ago, on Juneteenth 2021, KBLA Talk 1580 launched with a promise to give disenfranchised fellow citizens a voice in current political, economic, social, and cultural issues with an empowering, sustainable, and restorative language.
Everybody's gotta live the life under the sun, under the sun, under the sun, under the
As we enter our third year, we are delighted that KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerges as the talk station of choice for African American listeners. In a vigorous public opinion research study, the 2023 African American Media Issue Survey finds that for the second consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 remains the most trusted, credible, and reliable media source in Southern California for African Americans and beyond. Furthermore, 80% of those surveyed agree that outlets like KBLA Talk 1580 provide honest and authentic content about the issues most important to the black community directly from black journalists who understand the issues that need to be addressed. At KBLA Talk 1580, we remain committed to curating conversations that matter to you. Thank you for your continued support. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. The station that sounds like the city looks.
Book of Revelation, chapter 7, verses 16 and 17. Yes, sir. They shall hunger no more, neither shall they thirst anymore. Preach, preacher. For God shall wipe away, yes, sir, every tear from their eye. Yes, sir. Get ready for the revolution. Come on. What you say? Come on. Do you want a revolution? Say, do you want a revolution? Come on. Say what? Do you want a revolution? Come on. Do you want a revolution?
Sick and tired of my brothers killing each other. Sick and tired of daddies leaving babies with their mothers. To every man that wanna lay around and play around. Listen, partner, you be man enough to stay around.
I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. Playing some of the best of all 3 hours of our program today of Kirk Franklin. June is Black Music Month. Almost out of the month, but not quite. It's today the 27th, so just a few more days left. But every day in June, Black Music Month, we feature the music of a different iconic African-American artist. And that person today is gospel artist Kirk Franklin. We played jazz, we played gospel, we played R&B, we played hip-hop, we played a little bit of everything throughout the course of this month. And why should we not? That's the legacy of black artistry in this country. I can't imagine my soundtrack without African-American artists on it. I'm sure you can't either. Think about Motown and beyond. Every one of us has African-American artists on the soundtracks of our lives. And so in the month of June, we celebrate black music artistry. And once again, for all 3 hours of our program today, that artist is Kirk Franklin. In this hour, Are our choices truly our own, or are they predetermined by factors beyond our control? I think it's fair to say that most of us believe that our choices, our decisions, our actions are self determined, rooted in our individual autonomy. But is it really that simple? And how does the notion of free will impact our understanding then of moral responsibility? Philosopher and LSU law professor Dr. Ken Levy joins us in this hour to discuss the complexities of free will that you perhaps have never considered, its implications for moral responsibility, and the intersection between philosophy and law. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Ken Levy to this program. Dr. Levy, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's a great delight to have you on. I look forward to this hour, which I expect to be rich and brilliant. So don't let me down.
I'll try not to.
Yeah, just teasing. But let me start with this. And again, I do this not because I want to insult the audience, but because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about our definitions. I think language matters, definitions matter, and just to make sure I'm not losing anybody. Let me throw a couple things at you that we want to define, and then we'll jump into the dialogue. So when we say throughout this hour free will, we're talking precisely or exactly about what?
Good question. So there's the free part and the will part. The will part refers to decisions and actions. And then the free part, the professional philosophers will debate this endlessly. But I can say a few things. Generally, where we are in 2023 philosophically is free will requires certain conditions. One would be control over our decisions and our actions. A second would be what's called reasons responsiveness or rationality. It's a minimal kind of condition. It doesn't have to be, not every action has to be rational, fully rational to be free, but the idea is that we're more or less responsive to reasons, good or bad, for doing what we do. And then a third, more controversial condition is what generally just the ability to do otherwise. You ended up punching somebody, and we say you did that freely, meaning you could have refrained from punching that person. So those are now. There's a big debate in the philosophical literature. There's a debate about everything in the philosophical literature, but some would say you don't need the ability to do otherwise to be free. All you really need is control and rationality. But those three conditions are traditionally considered to be sort of the core of free will.
So I start with that because that trifecta, as you've laid it out, leads me to ask this question. Do all of us then possess some level of free will in our lives?
So again, this is hotly debated. But if you're just looking at those three conditions, the answer is yes, right? Okay. Certainly most adults have control in the general sense of, controlling your car, controlling your movements. We're sufficiently rational most of the time. And again, it's debatable whether we could have done otherwise, but generally we think that most of our behavior, we could have, tried harder to do something different, or we could have been persuaded to do something different. So generally those three conditions are met. Where the debate really starts vigorously is when people start talking about determinism. And you mentioned that in your introduction. If we're physically determined since before we were born by, the Big Bang or, just causes going way back before, we were ever born, then everything we do and think and decide is really not up to us. It was up to past causes. And so you have philosophers saying, well, if we're determined, none of our behavior is free. And then there's other philosophers who responded, no, even if we're determined, it still remains the case that we had control, we were sufficiently rational, and we could have done otherwise. So you have that debate going on. And what's come out of that is a whole movement, what's really called responsibility skepticism. They say this debate that's gone back and forth between those who say determinism is compatible with free will and those who say it isn't, they say there is no responsibility, there is no free will. It just doesn't exist. It's an illusion. And so we better give it up and start changing, society accordingly.
So let me ask this question then. I'm staying with you so far. Let me ask you then why, to your mind, before we jump more deeply into it, this debate matters. Because in the academy, there are always debates, as you said earlier, about everything. And to everyday people, some of these debates matter, and some of these debates, they don't understand why what the debate's even all about. So you're talking to a broad audience of folk who are educated, but we're also everyday people listening right about now. So tell me why you think this debate about free will, we'll get into its implications for moral responsibility and the intersection between philosophy and law. We'll do some of that later through the hour. But for starters, why does this debate about free will in this American moment, why does this debate matter? We just got to do, I just spent an hour talking about Donald Trump. You probably heard the tape that's out now. The tape on which Donald Trump is caught pretty red-handed sharing classified documents with random people. And he's made all kind of arguments about that. At the center of that debate is the notion of free will. Donald Trump had the control. He had the rationality. He could have done otherwise. The debate about free will is at the center of the Donald Trump saga right now. But broadly speaking, for all of humanity, why does this debate about free will matter to you, sir?
Yeah, great question. Let's talk about Trump. It really matters in primarily two contexts. When evaluating somebody's moral responsibility and when evaluating their legal responsibility. So let's start with the moral responsibility. I wrote an op-ed maybe a year or two ago. Is Donald Trump responsible for his bad behavior? And I think most people would say, well, of course, he's an adult. He knows what he's doing. He lies and he knowingly lies and so on. But there are arguments, primarily by responsibility skeptics, that no, he's merely the product of external forces going back not only to before his birth, but to his upbringing, his genetics, his brain. I mean, if you look at everything that motivates his very bad behavior, we can all agree it's bad and wrong, legally, morally, et cetera. You can get an argument out of that, yeah, he's a bad guy, he does bad things, but he's not responsible. And in case anybody, and by the way, I don't share that view. I think he is, but I think there are compelling reasons to think that we should be skeptical, that, we should be a little humble in our judgments about other people's responsibility. And example of that.
Hold that thought one second. I hate to do this. I see where you're going. This is I promise, it's going to be rich. It's going to be good. And my blood pressure is always starting to rise a little bit, in part because I'm glad to Professor Levy say he didn't buy that argument. But there are those who advance that argument. And you know exactly where I'm going, don't you? Jamal and Letitia can't make that argument in front of a judge when they go to court. That my past, my parents, my genetics. No, Negro. You're going to prison, and you're going to be there for a while. Again, Jamal and Letitia can't make that argument. And for anyone making that argument in defense of Donald Trump, I find reprehensible, but we're just getting started. And just so you know that I know where we are, when we come forward, there are two arguments Dr. Levy was starting to make. One, to this question about why free will matters, is moral. The other is legal. We'll pick right back up when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yo, Blaze, you crazy for this one. Hey, all the champions out there feel so good. Hey, I said it feels so good. We will.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community, Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and they're putting their money where their mouth is at. So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community. And, you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase and, give them, another look if I go to another institution. I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right. Chase is doing their part to help advance black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
In our community, mental health struggles can sometimes go unnoticed. The suicide rate among Black youth has risen faster than any other ethnic group. Only 1 in 3 African Americans who need mental health care receives it. African American women are only half as likely as their Caucasian counterparts to seek professional mental health services. Even those who guide us spiritually can sometimes face their own challenges. 45% of pastors say they've experienced depression or burnout to the extent they need to take a leave of absence from ministry. As people of faith, it's time to acknowledge it's okay not to be okay. You can pray and get help. Visit normalizehelp.org for more information and resources. Join us in raising mental health awareness in our community. Funded by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health and the Champion Counseling Center of Faithful Central Bible Church.
Buying your dream home can be exciting, but it might take some sacrifice. But don't worry, Rocket is here to give you a hand. If you buy with Rocket Homes and finance with Rocket Mortgage, you could get up to $10,000 cash toward closing from Rocket Mortgage. That's a big deal. Why not see how Rocket can help you start your legacy? You got this, and Rocket's got you. Only with Rocket. Visit onlywithrocket.com to get started.
For purchase transactions only, must like rate between 331 and 831. Call 8337 Rocket for conditions and restrictions. Class A rental license, all 50 states, NMLS Consumer Access. Number
Hey,
330.
Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley, recipient of the highest honor in the talk radio industry, the coveted Freedom of Speech Award. At Talkers 2023, let's get back to more of Tavis right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
To all my people in the struggle, you think God's forgotten about you. Here's some pain medicine. Let's go! You in your car, you at the house, on your job, be encouraged, boo. Come on!
I've been down so long, I've been hurt for so long. There were times I thought I'd never see the break of day. It was hard for me to see your plan for me, and I tried to believe, surely won't last away. So night after night, night after night, night after night, I pray Lord don't take your joy from me.
Don't take it, Father.
Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. We'll continue to celebrate June as Black Music Month. Our featured artist, all 3 hours of our program today, is Kirk Franklin. And he's sounding awfully good this morning with that remake of Patrice Rushen. But I like Kirk's treatment of that brilliant track. So again, Kirk Franklin, all 3 hours of today's program. We continue our conversation now with Dr. Ken Levy, LSU law professor and philosopher, talking about free will and whether or not the choices that we make are truly our own, or are those choices predetermined by factors beyond our control. Most of us believe that our choices, decisions, and actions are self-determined, that they are rooted in our own individual autonomy. Dr. Levy pushes back on that in some interesting ways, and we're talking about that in this hour, this notion of free will and whether or not we are truly autonomous in the decisions that we make. Before that break, Dr. Levy, you were just warming up on the answer to my question about free will and why this matters. And there was a moral argument you wanted to make and a legal argument you wanted to make. You were into the moral argument. Continue, please, sir.
Sure. So we were talking about Trump, and I think most people just think he's a very bad guy, and he's a grown adult. He's fully morally responsible, and if convicted at trial, he's fully legally responsible. Responsibility skeptics would say, well, nobody is responsible. Responsibility is impossible. Free will is impossible. So Donald Trump is no exception to that. But then we could look individually, putting aside the responsibility skeptics, we can look individually at Trump and come up with reasons to think. And again, I don't subscribe to these, but I want to be fair.
Sure.
To there are reasons to think that he in particular may not be responsible for his behavior, at least morally. We'll put the legal aside for a second. And those are, for example, my understanding is that he was abused as a child, and we call that the abuse excuse. And we say that pejoratively, but, abuse, violence can rewire a person's brain.
Mm-hmm.
And they can make, for all we know, if Donald Trump had a wonderful upbringing, he might have been a much better person today. So that's one factor. We might say he's mentally ill, severely mentally ill. Some have suggested he might be eligible for the insanity defense. I don't think he would do that for political reasons, but he seems to suffer from serious disorders, personality disorders. And we generally think they're not somebody who is suffering, for example, from extreme schizophrenia is not responsible for their schizophrenic behavior. And that's the basis of the insanity defense. But again, I don't think he's going to resort to that. There is a defense that has been used. We're going legal now, but this has moral implications. There was a defense a while ago that was proposed called the affluenza defense, which is that really rich, spoiled children never learned right from wrong, so you can't really blame them when they do the wrong thing as adults. That didn't go very far. But philosophers like to make those kind of arguments, but the courts weren't really buying it. Certainly juries weren't buying it. And one last thing I'll say about Trump, again, just something to think about is he, between his genetics and his situation, not merely, growing up, but he was surrounded by certain people with certain values, and he was pressured, if not coerced, into adopting those values. There was tremendous pressure to live up to his father's goals for him. His father kept bailing him out. And that shapes a person. That makes a person who he is, and yet those factors are external to him. And so again, and we're all shaped by external factors, by our upbringing, by our genetics, by our environment. And who knows what kind of people we would have been with different environments, right? And different genetics. So these are all reasons to think that we shouldn't be merely assuming, at least philosophically, that he's morally responsible. Now, I think when it comes to law, I certainly don't, and I think most people don't have a problem. If he's indicted, if his defenses, whatever they are, don't work, he deserves to be punished like anybody else. But I bracketed all that for the moral discussion, which tends to be more philosophical.
Yeah, I get it. Let me just pivot right quick and say something that may get me in some trouble, but I want to say it anyway, not the first or the last time. As Dr. Levy was talking, I'm looking at Miles and JD, I thought about Robert Sylvester Kelly. Nobody wanted to hear about the fact that he was molested as a child, that he was exposed. He basically lived in a whorehouse growing up in Chicago. That's just a fact. And he was hypersexualized at a very young age, and nobody wanted to hear the hypersexualization argument early on in his life for Kells. Of course, when I say Robert Sylvester Kelly, I'm talking about R. Kelly. Nobody wanted to hear that at R. Kelly's trial. And I'm not saying anything beyond what I'm saying. I'm just making the point that if we are talking about the fact that we are the sum total of our life experiences, nobody wanted to hear that. Now you get in trouble for playing R. Kelly music. I digress on that point, but I want to just put that out there since we're talking about free will and whether or not we do, in fact, truly make our own choices, or whether or not some of those choices are predetermined by factors beyond our control. I will set that over here for the time being and get back to this conversation. I'm only raising it because I don't want to hear that about Donald Trump, and you didn't want to hear about R. Kelly. But again, I digressed on that point. Now, here's what I want to get to. Your research and your work and your POV about whether or not our choices are truly our own, or whether or not they are predetermined by factors beyond our control. So let's unpack that, Professor Ken Levy.
Sure. So think about it this way: we didn't create ourselves. We were created. All of us were created through the process of reproduction. We were thrown into the world with a certain brain, body, genetic structure, and that our DNA had the program, for how we were going to develop. And so we didn't have any control over who we were, where we were born, and then certainly how we were raised. And so for the first, let's say, 10 years of our lives, or let's say 5, the first 5 years of our lives, we really had no control over who we are. It's all environmental and external inputs, right? And then somebody might say, yeah, but at some age, 6 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old, you took over, right? But the you that took over was itself created by all these external factors. So it's a machine, it's a computer that's now kind of reprogramming itself, but it's still that reprogramming was determined by its original program, which it didn't have any control over. So the argument is that none of us can ever really have free will, ever really have responsibility, because we're just sort of the outcome of all these other external factors. As you said, the sum total of, our life experience, well, as I would put it, the sum total of all these inputs.
Sure.
And so that's the real challenge, and that's the challenge of the responsibility skeptics, that how can you say anybody's responsible? And I think it's a metaphysical challenge, but it's also a practical challenge, because if they're right about that, then we have to dramatically rethink the criminal justice system.
Yes.
And not merely for the reasons you were saying, which are certainly good reasons, that there's, really 2 justice systems, one for white people and one for non-white people. But that certainly demands structural reform. The responsibility skeptics want to go even further and say, let's get rid of culpability altogether, because there is no such thing. It's predicated on this assumption that we have moral responsibility. And they're saying we don't. So we need to really think, when somebody violates the law, instead of saying you're to blame and you're responsible and you're going to be punished, let's rethink what's really going on here. And they liken it to somebody having a disease through no fault of their own, because there is no fault in a responsibility skeptical world. So let's quarantine them until they're no longer dangerous, like we would somebody who's got, a dangerous virus. Although that didn't really work out well with COVID. But theoretically, the idea is, don't blame them, don't judge them, just say you did the wrong thing, you're dangerous, and we need to lock you up until you're no longer dangerous. And that would be, and you might say, well, what's the difference? They think it would lead to a much more humane criminal justice system, where we're not blaming and pointing fingers, there's no anger or hate, there's no revenge. It's all about restorative justice, not retributive justice. And, I think they make a compelling case. I don't buy it in the end. I think it would actually lead to greater mass incarceration. And I could get into that if you want. But I think practically it would not work out. But their heart is in the right place.
Yeah. When we come, I hear your point. When we come forward, I want to come to this notion of, which we've kind of tiptoed around it. But it seems to me you can't have a conversation about free will without having a conversation also about good and evil. It is, I think, impossible to deny that in the world that we live, there is good and there is evil. And we have choices between choosing good or choosing evil. So it seems to me that you can't talk about free will without talking about on demand that there is good and evil in the world in which we inhabit. We'll come to that and unpack a great deal more. It's getting rich, and I love it. Our guest in this hour is philosopher and LSU law professor Dr. Ken Levy, who you're listening to right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
We thank you for joining us on this Tuesday. It is June 27th. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest. A child molestation lawsuit against Michael Jackson is being allowed to go to trial. Choreographer Wade Robeson claims the music icon molested him at Neverland Ranch when he was between the ages of 7 and 14. According to TMZ, Robeson is suing Jackson's corporation, MJJ Productions. Americans are keeping their credit card debt a secret from their partners. A survey by NerdWallet found 2 in 5 Americans think credit card debt is embarrassing and have lied about other finances. The national credit card balance is around $1 trillion and interest rates are topping 20%. Researchers say younger Americans are more likely to keep financial secrets from a partner. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Still seeing that top through Carson affecting the 110 North as you get up towards Carson Street. 2 right lanes are blocked with a crash. Now it looks like somebody broken down on the 110 North around Sepulveda Boulevard. They're stuck at a center traffic lane. Diamond Bar, problems on the 60 West at D-Bar Boulevard. A wreck to the right shoulder, slow from the 71. And the 60 West at Nogales Street, Rolling Heights. Crash on the right side here with a busy drive from at least that 57. Downey, that's a stalled vehicle slowing the commute on the 105 East. It's at Lakewood Boulevard. It's stuck in the left lane, and we're busy right as you get towards Paramount.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? Call the accident guys. Because unlike other firms, an attorney will negotiate your case, not a paralegal.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
LeBron James is hosting a film festival next month designed to promote films that empower athletes and their storytelling. The festival is July 13th at Newhouse Hollywood. One of the 2 films showcased in the festival is LeBron's Black Ice, a documentary about black hockey players dealing with racism. LeBron's company, Spring Hill Productions, produced the film. Black Ice opens in theaters on July 14th. The other feature film is Goliath, a Showtime docuseries about Lakers great Wilt Chamberlain. The film was produced by Content Cartel, a production company owned by NBA Hall of Famer Kevin Garnett. Garnett played the part of Chamberlain in a 1996 movie called Rebound, a film about a New York City playground legend named Earl the Goat Manigault. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you earn at the end of your first year, which means... Wait, hold up. Question for the audio engineer.
Go ahead.
Did I read that right? Discover automatically doubles all your cash back?
Yeah, that's what the script says.
So if I get a Discover card right now, I can earn twice the cash back.
Apparently. Wait! Unlimited first-year cash back match, only from Discover. See terms and learn more at discover.com/match.
Did you know that all City of LA renters have rights? Check out these 3 facts. Residential tenants can't be evicted without reason or just cause. Eviction protection still exists for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt due before March 31st, 2023. And you have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice. 5 days. Many Angelinos may be at risk of losing their home, and that's why we want you to know your rights. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home. The Shadow Sister Tour is coming to Malik Books, Westfield, Culver City Mall, Friday, June 30th, 2023 at 7 p.m. Author Lily Mead will be signing and discussing her new book, The Shadow Sister. This book is perfect for fans of emotional suspense, sisters with stories with complex family dynamics, and speculative fiction, including hoodoo. Lily Mead's captivating book is a must-read, truly a page-turner. From the first line to the final page, the moderator is New York Times best-selling author of the book, The Black Kids. Come out to Malik Books, Westfield, Culver City Mall for the Shadow Sister Tour, Friday, June 30th at 7 p.m. There will be diverse books featuring strong female leads. Malik Books is a community bookstore that amplifies the voices of our community and gives voice to the voiceless. For more information, go to malikbooks.com. Again, that's malikbooks.com.
We knew you'd stick around. This is LA's home for progressive talk radio. Welcome back to KBLA Talk 1580.
Melodies from heaven rain down on me, rain down on me. Melodies from heaven rain down on me, rain down on me. Take me in your arms and hold me close. Rain down on me. Yeah. Rain down on me. Fill me with your precious Holy Ghost. Hallelujah. Rain down on me. I feel it now, Vicky. Can we take it up here? Here we go, everybody. Melodies from heaven. Rain down on me. Oh, come on in here. Rain down.
Kirk Franklin sounding good here on KBLA Talk 1580 as we celebrate June as Black Music Month. Kirk Franklin is our artist in residence today, all 3 hours of Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. So glad to have you tuned in this hour as we talk about the notion of free will and whether or not our choices are truly our own or whether or not they are predetermined by factors beyond our control. Are we truly autonomous in our decision making, or do these sort of predetermined influences decide how we act and behave in real time? It's a question that matters because the impact of the answer to that question can ultimately be felt in every field of human endeavor. It certainly can be felt with regard to our justice system, our criminal justice system, which we'll get to in a moment in our conversation. Our guest in this hour is philosopher, as you imagine. You got to be talking to a philosopher if you're talking about free will. He's a philosopher and a law professor at LSU. He's Dr. Ken Levy, and I am honored to have him on this program. So I was saying before that break for news, traffic, and sports, Dr. Levy, that with all due respect to the responsibility skeptics, good and evil are as real as rain. And if we accept that good and evil exist in the world, then what's the relationship between good and evil and free will?
Yeah. So, if we assume it's real, as always, there are philosophers who say it's not real. Good versus evil is some sort of fiction. It's a useful fiction, maybe, or it's a counterproductive fiction. But if we assume that there is objective good and objective bad or objective wrong, then the picture seems fairly straightforward. I'm contemplating doing the wrong thing. I'm kind of going back and forth. Should I? I'm very angry. Should I punch this person or not? I keep using violence because it's easy. It's an easy example. And I know the right thing is to refrain, calm down, not hurt somebody. But I'm very angry and I'm very inclined to do the wrong thing and punch. And one might say, if I go ahead and punch, I did the wrong thing and I'm morally responsible. I knew it was wrong and I still did it. And if I refrain, I deserve some praise, a little credit for doing the right thing, resisting my temptation. And that seems a very straightforward picture. And many, if not most of us, accept it. Until we get into the philosophy classroom, right? And then the responsibility skeptics are telling us that choice that you thought you had was really an illusion, and you were determined all along. Or even if you weren't determined to punch, let's say, your brain just went in one direction rather than another. That wasn't you. That was your brain randomly firing. So that's not in your control. Or they might say the way you've been shaped, again, going back to our earlier discussion, social forces, your genetics, that all caused you to punch the instigator or your opponent. And so again, you have no control over who you are, what you are. And so they have all these reasons to say, even though it looks like a very simple picture, and of course you're responsible morally, you're really not. Now, again, legally, the philosophers aren't going to get into the courtroom. I mean, maybe you'll have a lawyer or two trying to say there's no such thing as moral responsibility and therefore culpability is itself an illusion, but I don't think most juries are going to buy that.
No, anybody buying that. Particularly if the defendant is black. We know they ain't buying if he's black. I digress on that point. Well, let me not digress on that point. Let me extend that point. And extend it in this way. What impact would rethinking the notion of free will have on our criminal justice system in America?
Yeah, so this is a really tough issue because we have to sort of play out, what would happen. I recently wrote an article where I said it would be massively counterproductive. It sounds good maybe in the beginning that, hey, we all kind of treat each other as, we're all humans and we all make mistakes, but we're not responsible for those mistakes because for all the reasons I gave before, that responsibility skeptics. So instead of trying to get revenge, retributive justice against wrongdoers, let's try to deter them, correct their behavior, restore the victims as much as we can to their previous state before they were victimized. And let's just try to deter this kind of misconduct going forward. Let's be more forward-looking than backward-looking. And the idea is to treat even perpetrators as more human beings, full human beings, instead of just criminals, reducing them to one-dimensional criminals. They are three-dimensional human beings. They made a mistake. Let's try to prevent them from making that mistake going forward. And that's the idea. I don't think it would work. I think we need culpability. But I should also say they also think we abuse the notion of culpability, and this is where I think race is definitely related.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to look at, historically in our courtrooms, black defendants as much more culpable, and the degree of evil. You can have jurors who think they are perfectly unbiased and not racist, but when you look statistically, they tend to be much more punitive and much more retributive against black defendants, non-white defendants, than against white defendants. And that's just the fact. And so the idea that responsibility skeptics have is let's get rid of culpability and this punitive kind of impulse of ours altogether. And then we can really judge them as not white or black, but as full human beings, and then see how we can make the situation better all around for everybody, the victim, the perpetrator, and so on. Yeah.
And what would that ultimately do? I'm just extending the thought here. What would that ultimately do to the so-called rule of law in this country?
Well, so my thought is that it would be very bad. We already have a mass incarceration problem. And if we decide tomorrow, it's never going to happen, or it's not going to happen for a long time. But if the responsibility skeptics won the day in the legislatures and they said, we're getting rid of culpability and we're just going to, then how are we going to judge defendants? We can prove they did the wrong thing, let's say, but now what? I mean, do we punish them? Well, they would say, no, we just lock them up until they're no longer dangerous. Well, how do we assess, we're not very good at predicting dangerousness, even for people with prior criminality. We're not very good at predicting recidivism. There are risk factors, and we're getting a little better. It's better than 50-50 odds, sometimes even 60 or 70% odds that we can predict. But that still leaves 30% where we're wrong. We can't leave it entirely up to our predictions how to deal with people. And in fact, what's going to happen is I think it would make it a lot easier for prosecutors to convict innocent people if we got rid of this culpability requirement. Because now they can just say, you seem dangerous. Yeah. And you can only imagine how bad that's going to be for non-white people.
No, I get it.
Right? For black people. I mean, it would just ease their prosecutorial burden. So now you're going to have even more punishment rather than less. And in that sense, I think it would be counterproductive.
When we come forward, then, I want to come straight to this notion of how free will impacts then our understanding of moral responsibility. We've been talking about a lot of factors in this hour. I want to come right to that. How our understanding of free will impacts our understanding of moral responsibility. We'll attack that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Get ready to experience the vibrant and rich culture of historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, like never before. Hollywood Homecoming Weekend Tailgate is here to celebrate the legacy and impact of HBCUs, happening on July 2nd at the Beehive from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. An incredible lineup of events that will make this day truly unforgettable. Get ready to move and groove to the beats as renowned DJ Jay Murphy takes the stage. Also happening, Grammy-nominated artist and rapper D-Smoke will be gracing us with an electrifying performance. This event provides a platform for networking, exposure, community, entrepreneurs, artists, and brands that are making a positive impact. Join us July 2nd at the Beehive for the Hollywood Homecoming Weekend Tailgate, a celebration of HBCU culture. Hurry and get your tickets now. www.hollywoodhomecomingweekend.com. Instagram at Hollywood Homecoming Weekend. Info at hollywoodhc.com for any questions. Mark your calendars and get ready to be a part of something extraordinary.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? You might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black.
Follow the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Are you a small or micro business owner looking for ways to succeed after the pandemic? LA County has got you covered. Gain access to economic opportunity grants and technical assistance to help your business thrive. Whether you need mentorship or capital investment programs, they're here to help. Find out if you qualify at recovery.lacounty.gov/programs. That's recovery.lacounty.gov/programs. LA County and you, moving forward together.
Heard any other talk radio lately that sounds anything like this? We didn't think so. You're listening to Unapologetically Progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Are you really responsible for the choices that you make? And therefore, should you be responsible for the repercussions and consequences that result from those choices? We're talking in this hour about free will with our guest, philosopher and LSU law professor, Dr. Ken Levy. Dr. Levy, let me come right to this. We've been talking about a variety of, factors in this hour relative to free will, but I'm wondering how you think the notion of free will impacts our understanding of moral responsibility.
Yeah, there is. Philosophers are debating this, whether free will is even necessary for moral responsibility. And there's been really in the past 50 years a vigorous debate about whether it is. There's many philosophers just now assume, and I hope this is answering your question and tell me if it isn't, that we can be responsible even if we could not have chosen otherwise. So going back to choosing between good and evil, it might be the case that I choose to punch somebody for, I don't know, saying the wrong thing to me. Let's say I started it. I insulted them, and then I didn't like the look of the person, and I punched them. So I did entirely the wrong thing. Some have argued that I can still be responsible even if I didn't do that freely, for all the reasons we talked about before. Even if I was determined to do that, even if I was made, I was brought up in a violent household, blah, 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 I can still be responsible even if I couldn't have done otherwise. And then they just say, because all responsibility really requires is control, and I controlled my arm. when I punched, and a minimal level of reason responsiveness. That I'm responsive to reasons. I'm not so delusional or hallucinatory that I'm in touch with reality, and that's all that's required. So you don't really need this metaphysical ability to do otherwise. All you need is control and reasons responsiveness. And there are a lot of people, they're called compatibilists, and there's different varieties of compatibilism, but they buy that. In fact, most professional philosophers are compatibilists. They think there's just a few conditions that are necessary for moral responsibility, and we don't have to get into all the metaphysics that you and I were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
We can just bypass that, and really it's a very pragmatic view, right? Because you and I, we're talking right now. There are all sorts of things we could say and do that we would judge each other for morally, and if we were suddenly say, you're not, there's no such thing as responsibility. You can't judge somebody morally, or you can't judge whether to blame them, for example. That would really interrupt our social relationships. It would, people think there couldn't be love anymore. There couldn't be genuine, any kind of genuine emotions toward others, because all of that presupposes responsibility.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be practical. Yeah.
Yeah. When we come forward in our remaining moments, there are two things I want to get to with Dr. Levy before we run out of time at the top of the hour. They are the following. Number one, it seems to me that there are things that we can do that don't take us all the way to the position of the responsibility skeptics, that we just do away with any level of responsibility. We buy this argument that nobody really has free will, that we all move in the ways that we move because of factors that are predetermined. We ain't got to go all the way to the wall in that regard. I think there are a number of things we can do between here and there to reform our criminal justice system. He's also a law professor as much as he is a philosopher, so I wanted to get his take on that. We don't have to go all the way to the wall. Can we do some things between here and there that reasonably reform our criminal justice system, number one? And number two, he raises here earlier that he laughed when he said it, I laughed when he said it, but again, it's real. It's been used as an argument before in other cases. And that is whether or not somewhere down the road we might hear the affluenza argument made by Donald Trump's team, that he was raised in such a wealthy family and was so catered to his entire life and didn't really understand the difference between right and wrong and good and bad and good and evil, and whether or not that defense might be used at some point. He's got to come up with something. And you heard that tape that we played in our first hour that's out now. It's going to be tough. So he's got to come up with something. I think Professor Levy's right. He's not going to use the insanity defense. But what about the other argument? We'll talk about that when we come forward in our remaining moments with Ken Levy on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, could potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey y'all, Mona Swain here from Target's new YouTube series, My Cart is Full, where we feature Black founders and creators highlighting their connection to our community. As an actor and content creator, I love using my voice to inspire young Black women who look like me. When it comes to feeding my shine, seeing myself reflected in Black-owned and founded products at Target brings me joy. Together, we are Black Beyond Measure. Learn more at target.com/blackbeyondmeasure.
The pandemic may be over, but many Angelinos could be at risk of losing the place they call home. It's important to know your rights as a residential renter in the city of LA. Did you know eviction protection still exists for unpaid COVID-19 rental debt that was due before March 31st, 2023? And that you have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice, also known as an unlawful detainer. Learn more about your rental rights at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got 4 minutes left in this provocative conversation with our guest, Dr. Ken Levy, philosopher at LSU, law professor. 2 things, again, in these 4 minutes. Number one, we don't have to be responsibility skeptics, Dr. Levy, to accept that there are some things that we can reasonably do to reform our criminal justice system as we know it. Yes, no?
Absolutely. I would recommend, and tell me if you may have already spoken with Judge Victoria Pratt, who wrote a wonderful book called The Power of Dignity. She was a former municipal judge in Newark, and she, instead of looking at every offender, criminal offender who came before her as just, like on an assembly line and a file, she treated them as three-dimensional human beings and really focused on the needs that each offender had. They had drug addiction, there was poverty, they had health needs, mental health, physical health. And she said she eventually set up a whole network, a whole infrastructure to address the needs of the offenders instead of just saying lock them up and let them out in a year or whatever. And they're not going to have any job skills, any education, and they're going to be right back probably recidivating because that's often the only way they can make any money. So she had a whole needs-based approach that I think we should do this across the nation, in the federal system, the state system, and a needs-based. And we are doing it. I know in Louisiana there's been some efforts where in Baton Rouge, drug courts. We have now drug courts. They're much more about treatment than punishment. But you were talking about racial, there's tremendous racial bias, and I know there's ways that people are working on minimizing the bias of juries. There's all sorts of structural problems and those are harder to reform often than what I'm talking about, it's sort of tailored needs. But absolutely, there's plenty of room, and more of the blue states than the red states are enacting one reform after another to improve the criminal justice system. We're all aware that it's not working. We're all aware of mass incarceration. Finally, we're all aware that it's been an incredibly unfair system for way too long, and it's been there's mass incarceration. You're destroying community. You've been destroying communities for decades, primarily black people's communities, people of color, and we destroyed their livelihood. I mean, we're aware of it now, and that's always the first step.
Right.
I slowly and surely reforms are being made. Do you want me to address the affluenza defense? Or are we out of time?
I do. I heard your recommendation. I love recommendations. JD wrote that down. Judge Victoria Pratt. We'll see if we can't track her down.
Great.
I got about 90 seconds. So you wrote the article. Is Donald Trump responsible for his bad behavior? How's he going to answer that in court?
I think just Donald Trump being Donald Trump is, if he even takes a stand, which I don't think he will, I think they're just going to try to poke holes in the prosecution's story, which is going to be incredibly hard to do. He's on tape. He's got dozens of witnesses. I don't see any real valid defense for him. But in the public arena, he's not going to say affluenza. He's not going to say insanity. He's going to be all proud and manly, and I did the right thing and I had every right to do it. That's not going to fly in court. But in the public arena, he's got his millions of people who will never leave him, right? Yeah. And that may be enough for them.
Yep, we shall see. We shall see. Our guest in this hour has been Dr. Ken Levy, a philosopher and LSU law professor. We've been talking in this hour about free will and whether or not we truly do make our own choices or whether or not they are made by predetermined factors beyond our control. If you missed any part of this rich conversation, check out the podcast of it, which we posted later today on all of our KBLA platforms. Until then, Dr. Levy, an honor, sir, to have had this dialogue with you. Thank you for your time. All the best to you, sir.
Thank you so much. It was an honor for me, too.
Thank you very much for that. When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, hour 3 of Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A teenager who was shot after ringing the wrong doorbell in Kansas City says he's just a kid. Ralph Yarl spoke out for the first time on ABC's Good Morning America. He said he wants to keep doing things that make him happy and live his life without letting the situation bother him. The black 16-year-old was shot by an 84-year-old white man, Andrew Lester, who is now facing 2 felony charges. A new report shows the U.S. housing market continued to strengthen in April. The latest S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller 20 City Price Index rose nearly 1% last month. A combination of low inventory and high demand pushed home prices up overall nationwide. Miami, Chicago, and Atlanta saw the biggest price gains on the 20-city index. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
We have an accident in Long Beach on the 91 West at Paramount Boulevard. Your right lane blocked there with slowing coming away from Artesia Boulevard. It is busy on the 110 South Drive. At the 105, you've got a wreck clearing to the right shoulder with slowing from Century Boulevard. And in Carson, watch out for debris in the roadway, 405 northbound at Rosecrans Avenue.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the accident guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? Call the accident guys. Because unlike other firms, an attorney will negotiate your case, not a paralegal.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.